Now I'm going to show you how to glue your pieces, and then we're going to get into assembling this beautiful little piece here. So first of all, I'm going to start with the middle hexagon, and that's the most simple shape to glue. It's the most popular shape, but it's the simplest shape to glue. So we're going to take our fabric that we cut earlier, and we're going to take one of our paper shapes. And you've got to remember the paper has a silk coating on it, so it works beautifully with the glue pen. So when you go to take your papers out, the fabric will simply peel off the back. So pop your paper shape into the middle of your fabric onto the wrong side of your fabric. And now we've got our glue pen. I love this glue pen. So we're going to work, when you open it up, it has a flat edge on it. So it's square across the top. And what we want to do is we want to work with the edge of the glue pen. So we're working just on the edge, and as you continually work on that edge, you'll create a little point in the middle of the glue pen, and then you can work with the point, and then you'll come back to working with the edge. You don't want to work with the flat of the glue pen because you're going to use too much glue. One thing, you're going to use a lot of glue, and you don't need to, and you're going to go through a lot of refills. But the other thing is it's too much glue onto the paper, so less is more when we're working with this glue. So I'm going to take the glue pen, I'm going to work with the edge, and I'm going to glue onto the paper. So right here along the edge of the paper, but not on the very edge. You don't want to glue on the paper and the fabric, and you don't want to glue directly onto the fabric. You want to glue onto the paper, but just a little bit in from the edge. So as I go along here, you can see that I'm just in from the edge a little bit. Then we're going to fold the edge over, and again, just getting a little tiny bit of glue on that folded edge there on the corner. And the reason for that is when we pull the next edge over, our corners will be nice and sharp and tight. And just make your way around the 6 sides, again a little bit on that fabric there, but keep it away from the edge on the paper, and continue all the way around till we get to the end. So that's the simplest shape you're going to work with, is the hexagon. And you'll see that all of those little corners are all neat and tidy, and they all fit in, they all fold over and fit in nice and neat. So there's nothing, no tails hanging out, it's just neat. But that's not always the case. So when I move on to the next shape, you're going to see what happens. So I'm just going to pop that one down there, and then we're going to move over to the next lot of shapes. So we're going to come out into this section here. And this is these 6 pieces will go round the middle of this, at the outside of the hexagon. So when we're fussy cutting, what I normally do, and it's not really crucial for this particular one, but these are the same shape. This shape here is the same one that I use out here, and so when I put this together, it's going to be really important that you follow exactly what I'm about to tell you. So normally when I fussy cut and I have anything that has a point on it like this, you're going to see as I move through this, we're going to have some untidy little tails that stick out the side, and they all need to lay in the same direction. So if you do what I do, it'll work out exactly how you need it to work out. So what I'll do is I'm going to lay them all going the same way, and I'm going to turn them upside down and put them not on my board, but I'm just going to put them next to my board here. And then I'm going to feed from that pile, and I'm going to take one at a time, and I'm going to glue the edge of it. So I'm just going to take the first one. Now when you're fussy cutting, you've gone to all the trouble of cutting this exactly. So you've lined up your pattern repeat, and we've cut it out so it's exact. So just with fussy cutting, what I would normally do is just put a tiny little bit of glue onto my card, and then I put it on and I line it up. Now if you're not fussy cutting, it's not necessary, because English paper piecing, seam allowances are not a crucial thing with English piecing, not like normal patchwork. The perfection is in this card. But because we've gone to all the trouble of fussy cutting that, we want each pattern to line up next to the next one, so we don't have any indiscrepancies. So I just put it on there, and then that will stop it from moving on the fabric as I move around and glue. Now, this is important. When you're working with these in a shape like this with a point at the top, you need to start on the same side. So on the same place every time. So if I start on the bottom right hand side here, the next shape I need to start on the bottom right hand side and move around. And then the next shape, the bottom right hand side. If I glue this one this time, my tail will go this way. If I glue this side first, my tail will go the other way. And that's why I do what I do because then I get my tails all heading in the same direction. And as I glue a couple of these, I'll show you exactly what I mean. So again, you're going to glue, keep the glue in from the edge a little bit. You don't want that getting into that side bit down here, because when we sew it up, as I said, it gets all gummed up and we can't get the needle through it, and then you know you won't want to do it. So make sure at these points you get a little bit on that fabric fold there and pull it over nice and tight until you get right round to the last side. So this little shape here is a jewel shape. So basically all it is an extension of a hexagon. So it's a hexagon with a little equilateral triangle on the top. So we call it a jewel shape. And the long side edge here is 2 inches and this is 1 inch. Okay, so I'm just going to glue the next one. So I'll put this one down here and I'm going to feed off that pile like I said before, pop it down, keep it going in the same direction. Just a tiny dot of glue on the back just so I can make sure it doesn't move when I glue it around. And we're going to start on the same side, bottom right. And you might want to start on this side, but if you start on that side, always start on that side. And we're going to go around the whole lot again, making sure that our points are nice and tight. The key to all of this is in the preparation. If you prepare correctly, when you sew it together, it just goes together like a breeze. If you have sloppy points and corners, you're going to struggle sewing it together. So this part is really important. So you can see I've glued those two, and when I put them down there, our little tails at the top are all heading in the same direction. And so these little tails, don't cut them off, don't fold them in. That's exactly how I want them to be. I want your point to be nice and sharp and your little tail coming out there. And when we go to sew it together, they'll all just sit in behind and they will just take care of themselves. But the reason I want them going in the same direction is because when we put them together, they're going to nest. So if I put this one on top of here, it will nest like that. So one of these little tails goes in under the other like that. So that's why I talk about feeding it off the pile, bringing it here so our tails go in the same direction. Because if you get something like in here, which is what this would do, you'll end up with a big lump in here. You don't want, if your tail was going in the wrong direction and you put them together, they're fighting against each other. So you end up with a big lump in behind your work. So that's the importance. This is why I do this, and that's why I also glue from the same starting point and work around in the same direction. Okay, so with these ones, it is the same shape as this, but these ones I'm doing now, I'm going to work them in around the outside of this hexagon. So I'm just going to take a needle and thread. I talked earlier about needles and thread. Now I've got two needles here. I've got a size 11 milliners. It's a Daley size 11 and a Daley size 15. And I'm just going to pop them down there and you can see the difference in the length. This is our 11 and this is a 15. They're exactly the same thickness of needle, but one's a little longer. And for English piecing, I generally use the 15, but some people like the longer one. I generally use the 11, sorry, and then some people like the 15. They're quite long, they're very fine, they're flexible in your fingers. So just remember not to grip them too tight. Just relax your hand when you're working and all will be good. The thread is the superior bottom line thread and it's very, very fine. Now I've threaded my needle and some people will say to me, you know what, the thread's really fine, it keeps coming out of my needle, I don't know what to do. So all I say to them is, let's just clip the end of your thread. We've threaded it through once. Let's take the end that we threaded through, we'll pull this down here and we're going to double thread our needle. And all I'm going to do is just go back and thread it a second time. Some people like to just tie a knot in the end of in the eye of the needle, but I like my needle to go up and down my thread. I don't like it if I can't move my needle up and down. This way, if you double thread it, your thread will move smoothly through the eye of the needle. And if you look closely at the needle, if you get one of these into your hand, you'll look very closely at the eye, and it's not a typical eye of a milliner's needle. We've made our needles with a much longer eye, so it's much easier for you to thread. So now that I've got that set up there, I'm going to just do a quilter's knot. And look, you can do any knot in the end of the thread. It might be a quilter's knot, which is generally you're wrapping the thread around your needle. And for this, with this thread, I'd probably wrap it about 6 times. Some of you will know what that is, and some of you will just know that knot your mum taught you when you were a little child, and I call it the lick and twist knot, where you lick your finger and you twist it and you end up with a knot. And if you like the lick and twist, that's okay too. Or if you like the quilter's knot, that's fine. So we've got that there, and we're going to take our hexagon. So what's going to happen with these is these are going to sit outside, around the outside of the hexagon. So we're going to start to sew. Now, I talked earlier about, you know, bringing a bit of technology into this technique, and the thing that I really was disheartened about with the technique in the early days was the fact that you could always see, you know, the threads on the right side of your work. And my mum used to say to me, if you can't do it right, don't do it. And so when I could see the threads on the right side of my work, can't do it right, don't do it. So I had to fix that. And that's why I use the type of needle I do, and that's why I use, well, one of the reasons I use that type of needle, and the other reason I use the thread that I do, because 1, the thread won't shred when I'm dragging it over the card, and 2, it's so fine it's going to sink into your fabric and you're not going to see your stitches on the right side. So we have a knot right in the end of our thread here, and I'm going to take my hexagon and I'm going to put it right side up in my hand, and I'm going to take my jewel shape and I'm going to put it wrong side down in my hand, and I'm going to line up those corners. Now, for some of you who haven't done English piecing before, are going to hang on to this really tightly, and it's going to be fine for the first day. And in the morning you're going to wake up and go, what is wrong with my fingers? Because you've gripped it so tightly, and it's just something that we do. So I suggest you might want to just add a quilting clip there, and it will hold it in place. And what that does, it's a bit of a psychological thing, and it stops you from hanging onto it so tightly, and you won't get that pain in your hand here. So we've got a knot in our thread, and we're going to come up in between the card here and between the card and this fabric here, so right up into the seam allowance and coming out at the point. And at that stage, that's where I just lose the knot that's at the end of my thread. It's for no other reason but just to lose my knot in there. And then I'm going to come in and I'm going to take 1 stitch. So when you're taking a stitch, you're going to stitch from here, so I say from the back to the front of my work. So I'm coming from the back here to the front, and we're going to go straight across, straight, very straight. We're not going to sew it on an angle. The shortest distance from here to here is straight across. If you sew it on an angle, you're more likely to see the stitches on the other side of your work. So if it's straight, it's going to be a really short distance, and then you won't see your stitches. So straight across. So we're going to take 1 stitch, and then we're going to come in for a 2nd stitch right at the same place, and your needle's coming directly across your work. So from back to front, straight across your work, you have a thread at the front and then 2 threads coming out of the eye of the needle at the back. The thread at the front is going to come down and under to the left, take it to the back, and the 2 threads at the back will come forward and under to the right, and then you'll pull it through and you'll get a little figure 8 knot here. You can see that little knot there, okay, and that's what makes the knot. If you don't have that, it means you've wrapped your threads in the same direction, so you would have to go back and do it again. So that will lock off the beginning of your work, and then we end our work with another knicker knot at the end, and then cut your thread just with a little tail on it. And then we're going to continue along and sew from the back to the front in a straight across, and we're just picking up 2 threads either side, so we're straight across there. But what you want to do is slide across the top of the card that's inside your fabric here. Sometimes you'll nick the edge of it, sometimes you'll take a little bit more of that. When you take your paper out, it'll look like it's been a little bit chewed, but that's okay. But basically you're constantly sewing across the top of your card, and it's just gliding right over the top of it. And you're going to do stitches about a 1/16 of an inch apart, or If you're a metric country, that would be 1.5 millimeters. And I'm just going to show you about how big that is. So if you can just see, if you're looking at the thread next to the needle, we're looking at about that distance, okay? So it's about 1/16 of an inch or 1.5 millimeters. And we're going to continue up here, just picking up 2 threads either side. I'll just do a little bit more and then I'll open it up and show you how neat the seam is. Okay, so if I open that up now, just take my clip off, you can see right in there, there's no sign of any stitches right in there at the seam. And that's what we're looking for. Okay, it's nice and neat and there's no stitches showing through on the right side. So we can close it up. Just put my clip back on, down here out of the way, and then we can continue to the end where we'll do a knicker knot. We're just coming up to the end. So this is where, if it's the very end, you can do a knicker knot right here. And some people might want to do that knicker knot and finish it off. So I'll just do that little knicker knot again. But I'm going to show you what I do, a little trick that I do. So again, thread at the front, under to the left, take it to the back. 2 threads at the back, come forward and under to the right, take it to the back, and just pull that through. Oops, sorry. Got that little knot there and lock it off. So what we've got here now is that this opens up like that, and we want to put this next piece in here. So you could continue around here, or you could cut your thread here, and then you could put this one in and you could sew down this seam here, in which case you would do this. You'd sew down there, and then you would fold it over in your hand like that. And bend it all up. Don't worry about bending the card and everything. Just bend it up how it works. And then we're going to do 2 stitches here and come across to here. But what I like to do, if it's not a very big shape, and this isn't a great big shape, so what I like to do is, rather than cut my thread at this point, I like to travel my thread up to this point here. Instead of cutting it, I like to travel it right up to that point there, and then I can insert this piece and I can then come down this side. And because my thread's already joined, you know, I haven't cut it, it means I don't actually have to do another knicker knot. But if you feel comfortable doing that, that's okay. I would just do 2 stitches on top of each other right there at that very point. And then I'm going to travel right down this side again. Just taking 2 threads of fabric each side. And remember, it's about 1/16 of an inch apart, 1.5 millimeters. And don't forget to, you know, relax your hands a little bit. Relax the hand that's holding the needle and relax this hand. Don't grip it so tightly that it makes your hand ache, because that's not fun the next day. And when we're paper piecing, there's always lots of bits to sew on, so it's best to, if you do these things, it helps you. So we're going to get down to this point here, and this is a Y seam now. So I'm going to come right into this very point. I'm going to do 2 stitches right there at that very point. 1, 2, right on top of each other. And then I'm going to open that up, and then I'm just going to bend it round, fold it in half, line it all up. If you want to put your clip back on, you can. And then you're going to do 2 stitches here. Make sure you catch the fabric on both sides. And then we're going to just travel along to the end of this one. I'm going to sew it all the way to the end of here. So when I open this up, you're not going to see any stitches on this right side of my work. So we've completed this seam and this seam. We've put a Y seam in here, and that was really simple. People shy right away from Y seams. They're one of those things that people just, you know, they don't want to do it. It's too hard. But with English piecing, it's always going to be perfect. And you'll end up with this center that we have in the middle of our block right here. So that would be the very center complete. And so we'll move on to the next piece. So there you have the center block, and now we've got two of them. So that's as hard as it is to do your English piecing and your fussy cutting. So then you just move on out into the next row and you follow your line diagram. Just follow it and add it. And there's no rhyme or reason, no rule about which piece you sew in first or which piece you sew in last. You just work it round as you see fit, and you know, it all just goes together. So I'm just going to move out and I'm going to go into this little stripe here just to show you how I line those stripes up. So I cut them out earlier. I'm just going to glue them for you, and then I'm going to sew them together for you, and then we'll be done with those two little ones. So over here we've got our two pieces that we cut out. So remember, these were the two we mirror image. So if you put them together like that, when you open them up, they're mirror image. So I'm just going to glue those for you just quickly. So again, I'm just going to put a bit of glue on the back because I want to line these stripes up. I want to make them, because when you look at that, I've lined the stripes up here. So we want to make sure that we get the paper in the right place so that the stripes are lined up at that point. So again, start on the same side and work around, gluing in from the edge a little. We have one of them, and a little bit of glue on the back. And remember, you don't have to put that glue on the back if you're just doing normal paper piecing, only if you're fussy cutting, just to hold it in place so it doesn't move. But again, remember the perfection is actually in the paper shape. Okay, so there we have those two. So when we line those up, we put them together, they meet up. So let me get that tail under there. So we nest those tails at the top, and when you put them together, they line up exactly. You can see your stripes come up and line up exactly. So when you put them together, you would just put your right sides together, and you would start. You can either start at the very point, or you can start at the wider angle and sew into the very point of it. It doesn't matter which end you start, and then you end up with this shape here, and then you would just inset this little piece with the eye on it here, this little circle dot here, and you would inset that into that piece there and it'll make a hexagon, but it'll look like a baby block. Okay, so then when we move out to this, I'm going to move on out here. So follow your line diagram as I said and piece it all together. I'm just going to move out to these blocks out here. So they're all exactly the same, these blocks around the outside edge. They're exactly the same shape as the one that we have in the middle here, except we've turned our points into the middle. So I have these here. These are the ones I cut for you before. So they've all been glued, and you can see that all of our tails are going in the same direction. They're all going this way, okay? So when we put these together, they're going to nest in the middle. So we've got one here. We're going to lay this one on the top of here. We're going to lay this one on the top of here, and we're going to make a half. And then we're going to have this one here. We're going to lay that one on the top of here, and this one on the top of here. So that's your second half. So you make two halves. Don't sew it all around in one go. Make two halves, because then when you've got your two halves, you'll put them right sides together and you'll sew from one side all the way across to the other side, and you'll just pick up. As you get to the end of this side, you'll do 2 stitches. You'll pick up 1 stitch on the top of this, the middle jewel shape, and 1 stitch on the top of this middle jewel shape. Then you'll come to the tip of this jewel shape and do 2 more stitches, go to the end and do a knicker knot. And that's the way you put anything like that, where all points come into the middle like that. That's how you do it. You always have to do 2 halves and then sew them together. It's not like a Dresden plate where you would sew them all around in a ring, because you will have a hole in the middle. and that's what a Dresden plate is. It does have a hole in the middle. You don't want a hole in the middle of this. If you sew them all around in one go, you will end up with a little hole in the middle. And that's a basic patchwork rule, you know, throughout, whether you're doing machining or traditional hand piecing, you always sew in 2 halves. So then when you've sewn them together, these will come together. I'll just nest them around there so you can see. And that's the fussy cutting we did. So this is probably different to anything else that I've got around on the outside of here, but that's how we make all of those blocks. There's 12 of those around the outside.